Welcome back to the RFK Refugees podcast. Ted here again. We are talking DC United, everything, and we have a very special guest on the show today. We have Alecko Eskandarian, the man, the myth, the legend. Alecko, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys.
It is okay if I call you Alecko, right? Or do you prefer Esky? I know
Absolutely.
people.
Whatever rolls off the tongue, man. I've heard every iteration of my name at this point in my life.
Yeah, man. Well, it's awesome to have you on the show. I guess let's get into it. A big reason we brought you on here, 25th anniversary of DC United. Hard to believe it's been going on. It's been going on that long. You were a part of the 2004 MLS Cup championship team. That is a memory that's near and dear to my heart as far as what I got to see you do on the field. I guess just give us a sense, like, what was it like being a part of that team in 2004?
It was special, man. I was obviously young, so I remember at the time just kind of being like, man, I wonder if this is what every professional team is like and things like that. I obviously went through a really rough 2003 season with being the number one pick and then just not getting as much playing time as I wanted. The team struggled. We had issues in the coaching ranks, and obviously there was a change at the end of the year. But there was just a lot of turmoil in 2003 where it was kind of like a rude awakening where I was like, man, I came from college where I was playing with a lot of my friends and kind of fighting for each other, and then all of a sudden that 2003 season was a bit of a circus, if I'm being totally honest. Like, so many strong personalities and just mayhem across the board. So 2004 for me was very much personally a redemption year where I had a chip on my shoulder where I wanted to shut up some naysayers and also just show the fans what I was capable of. And then I'm truly grateful for Peter Novak taking the helm and just giving a lot of structure and discipline to our squad and leadership that we desperately needed. And by the end of it, it truly was a brotherhood that I never experienced again throughout my career. So it was a special year. I think going through everything we went through in 2003 kind of helped us prepare and embrace how special 2004 was.
I believe you had a story. I think it was you that had a story about Histro Stoichkov not wanting to get subbed off, and Ray Hudson.
Yeah. I was supposed to come into a game, and literally, I remember my parents were like watching a game, and then they called me after the game. They were like, "Hey, the announcers were like, you were at the 50-yard line. You're like at half field. You're about to come into the match, and then you didn't come into the match. What happened?" And I was like, "Oh, because as I was about to be subbed in, they put up Hristo's number, and he just looked at Ray Hudson, and he just goes, 'No.'" And Ray was like, no, Hristo, you're coming out. He just goes, "No, 10 more minutes." And I looked at Ray looked at me, and then he was like, "All right, go warm up 10 more minutes." And then in the meantime, I think we scored a goal or the other team scored a goal, and then they just scrapped a substitution, and that was that. And I'm like, all right, that's how things are being run here.
Well, I don't think that's not like the type of thing that happened under Peter Novak's watch. I don't think Peter Novak would have stood for something like that.
Definitely not. And that's probably one of my more tame Hristo stories. So that guy's a legend.
Well, I think there was also there was a little snot-nosed brat who I think you would probably refer to him as coming in 2004 as well, Freddie Adu. What was the circus like? I mean, from your perspective, I guess, what was the circus like with that? And I don't mean Freddie. No, Freddie, I'm sure, was a very, very nice kid. I was trying to be a little funny there. So
no, Freddie's to this day a dear friend of mine. But you could call him a brat because he was a little bit of a brat at times. But
who isn't at 14, right? Who's
right,
not a brat at that age?
Yeah. No, I think we thought we were prepared for the Freddie show, but no one was prepared for that, man. That was the soccer version of the Beatles. I mean, literally everywhere we went was sold out crowd and a bunch of, preteen kids who were just worshiping Freddie. And me personally, I loved it because I've always been the type of player that whenever there was more on the line or more eyeballs or cameras, it always got the better out of me. So I love that Freddie was able to bring that to our team and to our league. But yeah, there was just so many other characters that were all of a sudden around the locker room, and agents and advisors and all kinds of people and psychologists. And yeah, he had a whole like entourage that kind of followed him around. And yeah, I'm sure it was tough for him to deal with. And it became a bit tumultuous with our team as well, because it became tough to ask him to behave like a rookie when he was the highest paid player in the league. So it was a weird dynamic, but ultimately I enjoyed my relationship with him as a friend, and also I liked playing with him as well.
You were part of what many people called the Magic Triangle in 04. You know, things weren't going all that well for the team. They were kind of sitting in sort of the middle of the table. Then DC goes in, brings an Argentine player by the name of Christian Gomez, and suddenly it took a little bit probably, but suddenly it just connected, and you guys looked like you were on the same page. And I still contend you, Jaime, and Gomez played some of the best soccer probably since the early days of DC. How is it that, you know, because Christian comes in midseason, we all talk about, you know, we see MLS players today coming in midseason like it's no big deal, and they take a while to acclimate. How was it that you, Jaime, and Christian were just able to get on the same page so quickly in that season?
Yeah, I think just Christian's skill set matched perfectly to what Jaime and I brought to the table. And it's funny because I remember in training, there'd be times where, just because of numbers, where Peter Novak would actually jump into practice. And there were times that we were, you know, playing 11 aside or whatever it was, just training drills. And Peter was an attacking midfielder. And I remember when Peter would jump in, if he was on my team, I would tear it up. I would score goal after goal just from Peter, you know, finding me on these little through balls and passes. And I'm like, Peter, please sign yourself. Like, we need a number 10, you know, like if you played, I'll score double the amount of goals. And so we'd always kind of joke around it, like we need a number 10. And then they signed Christian, and I'll never forget Christian's first week of training. He was terrible, like awful. And I remember all of us in the locker room were like, how much are they paying this guy? Like, where do they find this guy from? And oh man, what a waste. And like all this stuff. And he just like couldn't do anything right. He didn't speak the language. He didn't understand anything anyone was saying. So he found it really, really tough in training. And then it was probably like 10 days in, 2 weeks in, we played an 11 aside inter-squad scrimmage, and he legit scored 5 goals in 11 aside. And we were like, that's unheard of. You don't score 5 goals in 11v11. And I remember we kind of walked back in the locker room like, man, freaking Christian was on fire today. And we're like, yeah, 5 goals, like just must have been his day. And then all of a sudden it was his day every single day after that. And we're like, man, this guy's the real deal. And so once he kind of became the point of that triangle, it was the perfect storm, because between myself, Jaime, and Christian, we all had very different strengths. And if an opponent tried to key in on taking away any of those strengths, then we just knew it was going to be a field day for one of us at least. So it was truly a pleasure to play alongside those two guys. And I'll put us up against any back line in league history and know that we would score.
How much of a travesty is it that Jaime's not in the Hall of Fame? You got to give me that. Like,
to be honest, I mean, I didn't even know that. Now that you say that, I remember that, but I just think the whole thing is a popularity contest more so than quality. So I don't really put too much stock in it, because anyone that's played in MLS or played against Jaime knows Jaime's a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest players to ever play in the United States. So to me, I don't measure anyone by whether they're in the Hall of Fame or not. And I'm not just saying that because I wasn't nominated.
So let's I mean, obviously you played in one of what I would consider one of the greatest games. And it's not just because I was there. I think I was in middle school and I had parents drive me up to that game, and I was like freaking out because like we were in line for tickets, and it was like literally right as I walked in, you scored your goal against New England. That game was, I still call it the best game in MLS. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care if we have Messi and Ronaldo facing off. That for me will remain the best game. I mean, that was a game I think that kind of maybe I'd say it was a turning point. I mean, you had even the biggest skeptics of the league talking about how great of a game that was. What was it sort of like to sort of participate in that game?
Man, everything about that game was perfect. Like, even down to the weather. Like, it was like a nice, brisk, like little bit chilly fall day where, you know, the long sleeve jerseys came out, and you know, our opponent was tough as nails. New England had a lot of exciting players.
Some guy named Clint Dempsey. I've never heard of him. Never heard of him.
It's funny because the buildup of their team was actually pretty similar to ours, where they had a couple young guys in Clint Dempsey, Pat Noonan at the time. They had a bunch of veteran guys who had been around the league for a while, like Steve Ralston and, you know, Matt Reese and those guys, Avery John. And then they had guys who were in their prime, like Taylor and Shawry. So we kind of had a very similar team, and veteran guys like Jaime and Christian and all that, young guys like myself, Freddie, Brian Carroll, Josh Gross, and then the guys who were in their prime as well. The only funny thing about it is we played that game with arguably our best player, which was Ryan Nelson. So
Yeah.
to me, even that out, you know, we would have crushed them, I would say. But the fact that we had because I think Dima was out that game as well. Dima was out, and Ryan Nelson were out because they both were suspended. So those were two key pieces to our team that were out. So credit to the depth of how strong our squad was, where Ezra and Josh were able to step in and start and play a great part in it. But awesome game. I think it's one for the history books for sure, just with the drama, the back and forth, the quality of the goals that were scored, the intensity, the tackles, everything about it, even down to the coaches, just a bunch of legendary characters involved in that match. And yeah, I'm glad the fans got their money's worth that game.
Certainly. Well, I mean, I was in middle school. I didn't pay, but it was certainly worth it.
Your parents did.
Yes. Yeah. Well, my friend's parents did, but it was certainly worth it to me, and to see that game. And then we get to the final. We got to the final. Oh, I did want to ask. So there's a friend of ours, a friend of the show, Mark Fishkin, who's a Metro Stars fan. I don't know if you remember the Ernie Stewart goal. He contends to this day that Ernie was offside. Was Ernie offside?
Onsides. Yeah, perfect timing, man. Perfect timing.
All right.
It's a shame, man. We didn't have those HD cameras back in those days, or else they would have, if they followed the play, they would have seen that he was onsides. But I'll be honest, like, we timed it. We knew New York played a high line, and that ball was on all day. So I have no idea. Obviously, I wasn't a linesman that game, but I trust Ernie. He's been around the block long enough to time his run and not be offsides, especially playing on the wings. But yeah, it looked really bad with how New York backline kept stepping up even after he got it, which made the gap look that much bigger. But in all honesty, it wouldn't have mattered. Like, we had that series in the bag.
You hear that, Mark? You hear that, Mark? He was onside. Alecko says so. So it's true.
I mean, we were the better team regardless. No one is saying, you know, the Metro Stars were the better team than us that year. So nothing to argue there.
I don't know. And Amada Guevara stole Jaime's MVP award, so we'll call it even. How about that?
Oof. Yeah, for sure. I love Amado, amazing player, but yeah, Jaime was MVP that year.
All right, let's get to the cup. The 2004 MLS Cup. Yeah, you had an MVP caliber game. You won the MVP award. Your first goal, classic center forward's goal. I'm going to go ahead and call it that. The second goal, I believe you had some fun with Jimmy Conrad. I think it was Jimmy Conrad, right? You had some fun with him on that one. I'm going to contend I'm a certified official and definitely not biased at all. I'm going to say that was not handling. You were perfect.
Correct.
Fine. Ball to hand.
Ball to hand.
But talk a little bit about sort of that performance in that game, and you know, it was in LA. The fans were there. It must have been just an absolutely awesome experience, and really just to sort of cap off sort of the season you guys had.
Yeah, like I said, man, everything we went through in 03. And again, for me personally, I remember when I wasn't getting the playing time that I wanted in 03, there was all this chatter about, number one pick bust and, all this other, crap just in the media. And I just knew I needed a chance to play. And so when Peter gave me the opportunity to play, I wanted to repay him. So all year long, I was really happy with how things were progressing. And we went on a run. I think we went unbeaten in our last like 10, 11 games that year. And leading up to the final, it was just the culmination of everything we had gone through. And, we had a nice team dinner the night before the game. And I think it was Ernie Stewart who was like, guys, take a nice long look around the room because you never know what's going to happen in the off season. But one thing is for sure, that this group of players, this team will never play another match together. And that really struck a chord with me where that was like my first time where I was like, no, I don't want to break this team up. I don't want anyone to leave or anything. Like, I had so much fun playing with these guys. And I remember just going into that next day, I wanted to win so bad for our group because we had such a great group of guys. To give you an example of how much fun we had as a group, normally on every team, when you go out to bars or whatever it is, like every team has cliques, right? Like 3-4 guys go to dinner here, a couple of guys go there. Whenever we went out with that 04 team, we had like a group of like 22 that we'd roll through with. Like it was, we couldn't go to like packed places because we're like, nah, we're 22 deep. We can't just roll into, like, the party will follow us wherever we went type of thing.
That's really uncommon, right? If you look at MLS teams, that seems really uncommon.
Completely uncommon. Like I said, I never had that experience on any other team I've been on. I played for 5 MLS teams. So it was very, very uncommon. But that, again, it was the leadership in the locker room where, starting with Ryan Nelson, the captain, and even like the older guys who very much understood what that team camaraderie was all about. So going into that game, the other thing I'll say, which I actually tell this story to a lot of kids that I talk to these days, but I used to do, a group of us would go to like a Bible study before matches. So we went to this Bible study, and there was this whole verse about, stepping up when you're needed, and not necessarily about being a hero, but just taking responsibility. That was the whole message, right? Taking accountability, taking responsibility, not waiting for someone else to do the dirty work for you. And I'm not kidding. I'm in the match, sporting Kansas City Wizards at the time, score a great goal. Jose Burciaga, like 5 minutes in, hits a bomb. And I remember just being on the field, walking around, and when you're playing soccer, obviously the game's going on, but you're just constantly just talking to yourself, right? Like you have your inner voice that's just kind of like, all right, I hope this guy makes a play, or man, I hope Jaime beats this guy. I hope Christian, gets us back into the game, whatever it is. And you're just talking. And I just had this moment where I literally started telling myself, like, why are you waiting for someone else to step up? Like, you step up. Stop waiting for someone else to make a play. Like, maybe your team needs you to do something now. So I literally had just that message in my head, which kind of echoed the Bible study that we had prior to the match. And sure enough, the opportunity presented itself, and Brian Carroll passed me that ball. I posted up Nicky Garcia, turned around and spun him, and scored that first goal. And then the second goal, shortly afterward, Ryan Nelson, right before the game, was like, hey, you set our pressure. Anytime you feel like you can press their center backs and cause a turnover or a poor clearance, you go for it. You have that free reign. So I kind of baited, I think, Jose to throw the ball into Jimmy, and then I just ran at him like a crazy person. Jumped up to try to make myself big, but my arm was up just covering my face, and he kind of cleared it into me. At the time, I didn't even know where it hit. I thought it was close to like my elbow, but it certainly was not intentional or anything like that. My hand was near my body, but went through and just put it away. And then we got a third goal shortly after that as well. So it was a nice little 7-8 minute spurt to get those 3 goals. And then it was just about managing the game to see it through, but didn't get any easier with Dima getting a red card and playing down a man for those last 20, 30 minutes.
Dima, probably the most famous red card in MLS history. You probably endeared yourself to many DC fans. You were already endeared after your cup performance, but we got to talk about the celebration. We got to talk about the one, because you're a Jersey guy. You're from Jersey. I know you're a Jersey guy, and you probably grew up going to some Metro Star games. I'm going to go ahead and say so.
Season tickets.
Season tickets. I knew it. So what was it just had to be you, right? It had to be you, because I think it was the team someone was going to do it, and Jaime didn't want to do it, and you're like, well, someone's got to do it, so I'll go ahead and do it.
No, it was so when Red Bull bought the team, well, first I have to rewind, because when I was coming out of UVA, there were a lot of rumors that the Metro Stars were gonna trade up to take me number one. And that was kind of the message I was getting from, my agent, from a lot of people. So from what I understood, they had the opportunity to do so. And when they didn't, and DC kept the number one pick and took me, I took that in a way of, okay, you chose not to go this route and not to take me, not to bring me home. So now DC's my home, and now you're the enemy. So after that, I made sure any chance I had a chance to remind them that maybe they made a mistake, I was going to do my best to show them. So whether that was scoring goals in the playoffs or coming up with creative celebrations, that was something that I took to heart. And to me, it's just the spirit of competition and of the reason we played this game, right? Like, you want to play and have fun and talk trash and enjoy that pressure. For me, I always thrive under the pressure. So I loved kind of that little rivalry. And the other part of it is anytime I played against New York, that was a homecoming for me. All my friends, all my family were there. So the stakes got up even more. So I had to do something entertaining and fun for them. But when Red Bull bought the team, just in practice, we kind of joked around. I think it was Santino of like, oh, we got to do something, related to Red Bull. And when we went on that trip, Benny Olsen was actually my roommate on that trip. And I'll never forget, he was talking to Chris Albright prior to the game. Chris Albright was playing for LA Galaxy at the time. And Benny was just talking. He was like, yeah, our game's on ESPN. So it's, because you only got like one nationally televised game a week in those times. And sometimes it was like one a month. So we had the ESPN game. And so they're on the phone, and Albright's telling Benny, like, you got to do something on TV. And Benny's like, I'm not going to score a goal, but Alecko's going to score a goal. Like, Alecko, you got to do something. And I'm like, all right, if I score, I'll do something. But I didn't know what. And then when we walked into Giant Stadium and we went to our visiting locker room, we normally had a cooler filled with like Gatorade and water and recovery drinks and things like that. And we had obviously been there I think a month prior, where we knew the setup of the locker room. All of a sudden, Red Bull bought the team, and when we walked in, they replaced the cooler with just like a giant Red Bull freezer with 1,000 cans of Red Bull. And we were like, what is this? Like, where is our normal setup of like water, Gatorade, recovery drinks, and shakes and all that? And it was just gone. And we literally had to tell, I think, the team admin to go find us like water and Gatorade. Like, it was a little bit of a slap in the face where we're like, dude, we get it. You guys bought the team, but you still need to treat us like opponents. This isn't like a commercial, So right at that moment, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something with one of these Red Bull cans that's in this freezer. So I took one out to the field with me, put it next to the bench, told one of my teammates, hey, if I score a goal, throw this over. And I didn't really choreograph or plan it. So I ended up scoring, 15, 20 minutes in. I feel like it was early in the first half. And I had never had a Red Bull before. I had never drank Red Bull in my life. It was like a new drink, So
it's a high risk move then. It was kind of a high risk celebration for you there. Could have tasted like anything.
I thought it was like a Powerade, I thought it was just going to be like a sports drink. So when my teammate threw it over to me, and my plan was to like chug it and like smash it against my head or something. But then as soon as I started to drink it and it hit my lips, and I was like, oh man, this is carbonated, man. And all of a sudden I'm like, if this is soda, I'm going to like cramp up. So I had to call an audible pivot my celebration, and right away went to spinning it out, pretending like I meant to do it, tossing the can, and went off on my way and got the second goal in the second half just to be safe.
That's good improv. That's good improv. Then you adjusted, and it seemed, I think it worked out just as well as your original plan. I think.
I'm sure Benny loves the fact you're telling that he's the genesis of the whole plan, by the way. Let me just say. He's the spark.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't tell me what to do, but he definitely influenced me doing something. I'll leave it at that.
So I think most of our listeners are new fans. So and that last question would count for this. So apologize in advance for asking to play the hits a little bit. But there's one more that you know is coming, I think. So it's Alecko and Kanye West. If there was a there before the grace of go I situation, I think this is one of them. So could you tell us a little bit about your brush with sort of TMZ level fame and how it came about, and then if you had her phone number afterwards, what happened there exactly?
Yeah, man, LA is a funny place. A lot of celebrities rolling around, and everyone's all about image and all that stuff, which for me was never a big thing. But one day out of the blue, I had some friends of mine who were also Armenian who ran an auto body shop in LA, and they're huge soccer fans. So when I came to LA, they kind of opened their arms to me, and we became friends. And one day out of the blue, one of my friends was like, "Hey man, would you ever go out with Kim?" And I was like, "Yeah, obviously. Like who wouldn't?" And he was like, "Yeah, like I'll put a word in. I'll put a word in." I was like, "All right, cool. Like put a word in if you want, but like it's not gonna happen, obviously." And that was that. And then all of a sudden, it was probably like 2 months later, no heads up or anything, I got a phone call one day, and it's Kris Jenner, Kim's mom. And she literally calls and says, "Hey, is this Alecko?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "This is Kris Jenner, Kim Kardashian's mom." And I'm like, "Sure it is." And I thought one of my friends was just playing a joke on me or whatever. So I wasn't taking it serious at all. And then all of a sudden I realized I was on like speakerphone, and Courtney and Chloe were like in the room as well. And they were like asking me 20 questions, and they were like, "Hey, you were recommended as like a cool guy that Kim should go out with. So we're just trying to get to know you a little bit." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then they were like, "Yeah, you passed the test. So we think you're the right guy." And next thing you know, within like an hour, Kim called, and had a good conversation, set up a date. Producers rushed over to my apartment in Hermosa Beach shortly after that, where I signed my life away on like a million contracts, not having any idea what I was signing. And then, yeah, we went on a date. And it was a good time. Honestly, nothing crazy. From the moment we started, I told Kim, I'm like, "Look, I'm not built for this life, but it's a pleasure to meet you. No stress or pressure. Let's just have a good night." And she was totally down with it. I think our date lasted like 4 hours, had a great time. And we kept in touch for a little bit after that. But for me, it was nice to meet another fellow Armenian who actually does a lot for the community, and nothing but good things to say about her. Totally down to earth, really nice person, good heart, and we had a great time.
You and then Ben Olsen that one time when we were about to sign Wayne Renew, that was the 2 times a DC United adjacent player has been on TMZ or has been picked up in gossip rags. So, we'll take it 1 out of 2.
Listen, I'm more excited about. I got to be on the Price is Right. That to me is my.
That's great.
Yeah.
An LA experience if ever there was one. So I wanted to quickly sort of pivot to what you're doing now. So are you the director of player development at MLS? Is that still your current title?
Yeah. I work within the player relations department with a focus on player development as well. And yeah, it's been about 3.5 years now at the MLS front office, and it's been great. Obviously, after my playing career, I went back to school, finished my degree at UVA, and then had a couple of different jobs. I was youth technical director at the Philadelphia Union, and then I was coaching for 4 or 5 years professionally with Philly, and then at the New York Cosmos. And during that time, I realized that I had more of a passion on the business side of things. And even though I love coaching, and I think at some point in the future I could always go back to that, for me, I just felt like there was a lot that I wanted to learn and that I could offer in the front office side of things. So made that change, and it's been fantastic being in the league office, seeing how everything works from the background, working with all the clubs, from everything to player signings, to academies, to scouting, to events, the whole, every facet that goes into making our league work. I feel like I have some involvement or say in. Just there aren't too many people, I guess, with my background in the office, so it's pretty nice to be able to be in a lot of these meetings that are really impactful on the end product that you see today. And really proud of how far the league has come from the days that I was playing to where it's at now.
What are some things that maybe has changed as far as from the player development perspective? Obviously, you came through college. And now, we have homegrowns and all these other things. What has sort of been the biggest thing you've seen as sort of from your time playing and to what you're seeing like today?
It's completely different. Obviously, there was no academy system when I was coming up. So you played for your town club team if that's where you grew up, and you stuck it out, whether it was good or bad. Nowadays, they have all the academy set up, which offers high-level free training to all the top players. And the idea is basically to pool in all these top players to make sure that kind of like iron sharpening iron, like all these top guys are together competing against each other and with each other every single day. And essentially having these mini all-star teams, you could even call it, that are highly competitive, are require a great deal of commitment and sacrifice and discipline from these kids. And with that said, there's some negative facets to it too. I think there's also some kids who sometimes let that get to their head and become spoiled as part of it. Whereas when I was coming up, everyone kind of had that hunger and chip on their shoulder. So it's just a very different, a different format and system from where I was coming up. But the one thing that is a huge positive is opportunities. Nowadays, there are so many more teams and clubs and different pathways to reach the professional ranks, which is such a great positive step for soccer in this country. Whereas where I was coming up, if you didn't make ODP or a state team, like, you were screwed. It was really tough to be seen. I know even for me, my club team never won a state cup. We never even made it to a state cup final. Like, I was the last recruit even at UVA. And my second choice, if I didn't get into UVA on my 15% soccer scholarship, I would have ended up going to Princeton, which at that point, I don't even know if I would have continued playing soccer if the academic burden became too heavy. So nowadays, the fact that you can have so many more opportunities to be seen and have more quality coaching and programs and things like that is a huge step in the positive way. And on top of that, you have different leagues now with USL and NPSL and PBL, and again, so many different pathways to get to the top level.
As a league employee, I'm sure you have access to the secret Google Doc that has all of the various amounts of Garber bucks that each team possesses at any given time. I'm sure there's a Google sheet somewhere that's got the all can edit but none can see. I assume that's part of the. We wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure that we got.
It's locked away in a safe, and nobody has.
I'm sure. I wanted to get. We had a couple Twitter questions I want to get to you real quick. Eric Hatch said, of your experiences with other teams other than DC United, which was the most positive and why? And I will add, and it was probably Chivas, right? It was the best.
Chivas, we actually had a great team, a great group of guys, but we were treated like second-class citizens, man. It was just not a well-run organization at all. And it's a shame because we actually had a really, really strong team and guys like Jesse Marsh, Ante Raza, Sasha Kleshton, Johnny Bornstein, Zach Thornton, Jim Curtin. Like, we had a squad, man. We were it was great. But I would say LA Galaxy for sure was the closest between DC United and LA Galaxy. Those are definitely my two favorite clubs to play for. And again, with LA, just the way we were treated was really professional. Truly an honor and a joy to play with David Beckham. And I think just his presence upped the ante on the league as a whole and how clubs should be operated. I think it set a new standard, and the way he carried himself was really impressive to me as well, because he obviously was himself probably worth more than the entire league combined, but he showed up to work every day, was truly humble, was a great teammate, was great in the locker room, and never acted like he was bigger than any of us. And even I actually just saw him 2 weeks ago. I went to Inter Miami to visit those guys, and he happened to be there on the training field when I walked in. And a part of me was like, man, I don't like, we played together, but I don't even know if he remembers my name. But right away, he's like, oh, Alecko, and kind of dapped me up, and we just caught up on the old times. So truly a special guy and a great person. And we had, again, so many other great players on that team, on the LA team, like Greg Berhalter, Johan Karofsky, Eddie Lewis, Landon, obviously, Mike McGee, Edson Buttle, Omar Gonzalez, AJ De La Garza, like just another all-star team of guys where coming to work every day was honestly so much fun.
You had a banger against New York for LA. I'm sure he remembers that.
So it's homecoming. And that was the last ever MLS game at Giant Stadium.
Yeah.
And that was where obviously my dad played, and I had so many memories and so much history there. So I had to go out with a bang. But that ended up being my last MLS game because I got my career-ending concussion the very next week.
All right, I think we're gonna close out the free version. So do you got some time to hang out for a little bit longer, like a little bit more time?
No problem, man.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, appreciate it. All right, so if you're listening on our normal podcast feed, we're gonna end the show here. But if you are listening on our Patreon, we're gonna talk a little bit more with Alecko. So it's just $1. Put some money in. You get to hear more from Alecko. Alecko, tell the good people, if you have anything you want to plug, anything you want to find you. I mean, I know that you have your Twitter account, but if there's anything else, feel free to drop it right here.
No, man, I'm 37 years old. I don't need to plug anything at this point other than support your local soccer teams. That's my plug.
That's a good plug.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, man. All right, well, thank you all so much for listening. You've listened on the free side, Patreon. Stick around, listening to the RFK Refugees podcast. All right, so we want to sort of spend the second kind of going into, I think a lot of people know about, Taylor Twellman, his concussion issues, and everything like that. You suffered as well. There have been articles written about it. What do you think? From what you experienced has, how much has that sort of changed maybe even your perspective when coming in as a player? You tough things out, in certain sense. But now it's sort of very different. And talk a little bit about that and how much you really struggled with a concussion I think it started in DC, I believe.
Yeah. My professional debut was my first concussion where I was knocked unconscious and spent the night in the hospital. But it's I don't like talking about it, to be honest with you, but it's one of those that is a sad reality of my career, and not just my playing career, but it altered my life in more ways than I could have ever imagined. It's something that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, because there's just so many different facets that come with dealing with concussions and post-concussion syndrome. And it's very much an invisible injury where, the only person who truly knows what they're going through is the person who suffered. And on the outside, you look fine and normal, and it becomes a bit of a catch-22 where you want to show people that you're struggling and you're not normal, but you also are, yearning to feel normal. And it's just a really awful feeling. I felt like I had a black cloud over my head for numerous years, and struggling with depression and all kinds of different things of just trying to figure out what can I do, what can't I do, who am I, all these different things. You're forced to really ask yourself the tough questions and take a long look in the mirror. Fortunately for me, I had a strong support group with my family who was there to deal with me through the rough times. And I think one of my strengths as a player and just as a person is my mental toughness was always something that I felt gave me the edge to even allow me to become a professional soccer player. And that's something that I relied on to the last drop to get me through it, because it was tough, man. It was really tough. But I'm I'm glad that we have been able to raise more awareness, and the world as a whole, especially our country, has done a phenomenal job of teaching kids and athletes the importance of monitoring your concussions, reporting concussions, and most importantly, I think teammates and opponents looking after each other just as fellow human beings and fellow competitors, to look after one another. Because unfortunately, if you're struggling and you're out of it, you might not even know that you're putting yourself in harm's way. And now your life is in the hands of either medical professionals or even those that are around you.
You mentioned, go ahead, Ted.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I dealt a little bit with that beginning of March before this coronavirus hit, and U10's not heading, and that's something that didn't exist 5 years ago when I was refereeing. So it's good to see those types of changes. John, you can go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of the fact that it's an invisible injury too, and I often think about there's a long list, unfortunately, even at DC United, of players that had a series of concussions, and either they came back too soon or just the fact this is the way they go. You have one, I don't know if you're more susceptible for the next one or not, but they just stack up. And it seems like it's a real big challenge as a young player specifically to be your own advocate in that situation and say, no, I'm not ready yet. I know that this is not the case. And also I imagine too that your teammates look at you differently if you have a torn ACL than if you have something they can't see, or, normally it takes this long, it's taking you double the amount of time. What's that like in the locker room, dealing with something that isn't a known quantity from an injury perspective, and sort of having the onus be on you as a young player, as a 23-year-old trying to, it's the environment, and it's different than being in an office. It's a completely different dynamic. Like what's that experience like of having to navigate both of those things at once, both from your teammates' perspective, your coach, the front office? I imagine that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it was crippling mentally. And when I went through it, I believe there was only one other player, who was Ross Pauly, I believe, was the only guy before me who had kind of dealt with these concussions, where he missed a long period of time. And in 2004, when I think I had my third concussion, and I ended up being out for 10 months, it was really tough because, like you said, everyone was kind of like, I'd already had 2 concussions and I'd come back within a week. So all of a sudden on this one, everyone's like, oh, you're going to be back next week, right? And then I was like, yeah. And me too. I was like, yeah, I hope so. And then all of a sudden these symptoms were like just wearing on me and getting worse and worse and worse. And I was trying to convince myself that I was okay. And I actually did come back and start training, and then I was getting worse migraines, and it just became a really, really tough mental battle to deal with. And my teammates at the time, and even my coach, our way of banter in the locker room, of trying to encourage guys to come back, was to talk trash, right? So you're just like, oh, come on, man. Like, you're sitting out for a headache. We need you this weekend. Like all these things. And it was helping a little bit. Like, I was getting motivated, and all of a sudden I'm like, man, this isn't all right. And thankfully I got a second opinion from a neurologist who totally shut me down completely from any activity. And again, my teammates were like, ribbing me a lot at training. But I think at a certain point, they realized how serious it was, because they saw the pain on my face of not being out there. And I had a moment where I was actually just laughing about this the other day, where they told me I couldn't run, I couldn't work out, I couldn't do anything without getting serious migraines. So they told me all I could do was walk. So it was the middle of June or July, and I told our equipment manager, I'm like, give me every article of clothing that you have. And I just like dressed up with like layers upon layers upon layers. And in this like 100-degree heat, I just kept walking around the fields, because that's the only thing I was allowed to do. And I was just sweating, like dripping sweat, like I was in a sauna. And everyone's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, I need to stay in shape. I want to stay fit. Like, I can't just sit on the side or just walk around like doing nothing. Like, I want to suffer. I want to give myself that rush to stay fit and push myself. And at that point, even my trainer's like, dude, you're going to pass out. Like, this is not a good situation. So then Peter Novak pulled me aside and he was like, listen, I think you need to leave DC. He's like, I've been told, you're not going to be cleared to play for another little while. And I could tell that you being here is not a good situation for you mentally. Everyone's kind of, busting your chops about getting back. I know how bad you want to get back. This isn't about, rushing you. This is a matter of you getting yourself right. So he's like, go home, go back to Jersey, be with your family, get away from soccer. And that saved me, to be honest with you, because if not for that, I don't know what I would have done with my free time and how much of a dark place I would have gotten into. So that was very much a saving grace for me to get away from it all, be with my family, stay away from soccer, not watch games, and just focus on my health. So the trouble with all of this is that worked for me, but what worked for me doesn't work for everyone. And I get phone calls to this day from kids, coaches, parents of players who are dealing with concussions and asking me for advice. And it's really tough for me because, I can share with you what worked for me, but that's not a guarantee that it's going to work for you. And that's really, really tough when you talk about athletes who are looking for a plan to return to play.
That was going to be my next question, actually, too. I assume that was, you get a lot of, you and Taylor probably get a lot of phone calls from, other players in the league, but also, like you said, kids, high school players, college players. And I think you're right. It does seem to be really personal, both from a recovery standpoint and how much is enough and when do you feel like the risk is worth it and when do you not. So I think that does seem like an impossible situation for you to really, to really give guidance other than just say, this is the choice I've made and it's worked out well for me or whatever else. But
yeah. And listen, I'm not out of the woods yet either. I still have my good days and my bad days. And like I said, there's some that will affect me for the rest of my life. And the minute I learn to accept that and deal with that and then try to make the most of what I can do is when I kind of jump the curve a little bit on my road to recovery. But yeah, for years, I was in a dark place of just kind of being stuck with always saying, wow, I can't do this. I can't do this. Or like, this affects me. Sunlight affects me. Noise affects me. Like it takes away so many of the joys of your life that it really becomes unbearable at times.
Ted?
Oh, I don't know if I have anything. You've been so good, man. You've been awesome.
I put such a gloomy.
But we left it on a real high note. Let's talk about getting stuck in the house for 24 hours a day for 3 weeks. let's really end it on a. We appreciate it.
No, man. Thank you guys for having me, and always a pleasure to talk about those great teams and keep supporting the squad. I'm hoping for more successful days ahead, but we're nothing without our fans, man. So thank you for your support as well, and look forward to meeting you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Alecko, thank you so much for coming on. And I know my dad's jealous of you because he watched you. He's a UVA guy too, so he's getting jealous of you right
nice.
now. I know that too.
Wow.
Exactly, my friend. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for the Patreon listeners for joining us, and we will catch you all next week. Vamos.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.